Hello everyone, I know you watched this video to accompany you to sleep. So if you like this video, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. Also, don't forget to tell me where you are from and what time you watched this video. Let's jump straight into the story. Story 1. Today, a case from the United States, a very difficult investigation, searches conducted on a huge scale, and a murderer's motivation remaining unclear to the end. These are the features of this criminal case. But there's something else that sets it apart: drama. While it's true that there are no criminal cases that aren't dramatic, in the story described here, the drama seems to grow and grow, ultimately revealing an unimaginable level of cruelty and pathology. On the morning of December 19, 2001, in the city of Waldport, Oregon, USA, the weather is brisk and pleasant. A young man is walking along the beach near the Lint Slough estuary when he notices an object of strange shape moving on the water's surface. There's something unsettling about the object, so the man decides to call the emergency number. Detectives who arrive at the scene find the body of a young boy dressed only in underwear. The boy is around 4 years old, well-groomed, as evidenced by his neatly trimmed fingernails and toenails. Since there are no visible signs of force on the child's body, and thus the cause of death is unclear, the detectives initially assume that the boy drowned. While securing the scene on the beach, they discuss that the child probably lives nearby, and someone who is looking for him might show up soon. However, no one does. No one also reports a missing child. This is very strange, and the investigators begin to consider that they may be dealing not with an accident, but with a murder. To solve this case, a special team is formed, consisting of local and federal officers, as well as experts from the FBI specializing in particularly difficult murder cases. The most important thing at this point is to establish the child's identity because, without it, it will be difficult to explain the circumstances of his death. Initially, officers organize a group of people to go door to door in the area and inquire about a child of that age. They show a picture of the found boy at each address and ask if anyone knows him. They also ask if anyone heard or saw anything unusual the previous evening. The police consider all possible scenarios, including a car accident involving the found child. Therefore, a helicopter is enlisted to search both the estuary, where a submerged car could theoretically be, and the surrounding roads. Since these searches yield no results, the police decide to turn to the media. A photo of the boy along with information that his body was found in the bay appears in the local newspaper. In the usually quiet Waldport, such material is somewhat sensational and quickly makes its way into the local TV news program. Denise T. is currently at her parents' house when she hears the news about the body of a boy found in the water and notices a familiar face on the TV screen. One of the children she has been occasionally looking after lately. She had been taking care of them just a few days ago. Denise immediately contacts the police. Denise tells the police that the boy's name is Zachary Longo, and he has 2 younger sisters, 3-year-old Sadie and 2-year-old Madison. The children's father is named Christian Longo, and Denise works with him at a chain cafe in Newport. Christian's wife is named Mary Jane, and the whole family has only recently moved to Newport about 6 weeks ago. Newport is located about 25 kilometers from Waldport. The police immediately go to Christian and Mary Jane's apartment. It's an elegant apartment right on the waterfront. Although there is no one in the apartment, it doesn't seem like anything is amiss. There are no signs indicating that someone suddenly left. Everything is neat, and it looks like the family could show up at any moment. The police thoroughly search all the rooms, hoping to find anything that could help determine the family's whereabouts. The officers find no trace. Worse yet, another problem arises in the investigation. No one knows the Longo family well. The police find out that Christian and Mary Jane have indeed been here recently, but no one can provide any specific information about them. It's as if they live isolated from the community. The FBI begins searching for the Longo family's relatives and friends nationwide. The police first try to determine if Christian and Mary Jane had cell phones and who contacted them. While investigations are still ongoing, police divers are sent to search the waters near where the boy's body was found. Investigators hope to find items that will help solve the case. However, no one expects to find another child's body. The body of a 2-year-old girl is found in a sleeping bag. Like the previously found boy, the child is only wearing a sleeping bag. Tied to the girl's foot is a pillowcase containing a huge stone. At this point, it becomes clear that the police are dealing with murder. The officers suspect that the girl is Sadie, Zachary's 3-year-old sister. Divers continue searching and find another sleeping bag with a pillowcase, also containing a stone inside. The manner in which Zachary died now becomes clear. He was drowned, just like his sister. The cruelty of this crime against the two young children overwhelms everyone involved in the case, even those officers who have dealt with murders for years. However, it is still unknown who did it and why. Whether it was someone from the family or if the children, possibly along with the whole family, were murdered by a stranger. The case becomes increasingly mysterious, especially since there is still no detailed information about the Longo family. One thing is certain. Time is of the essence because no one knows what else the murderer might do. Photos of Zachary and Sadie are published in the media, and the police ask anyone who knows anything about them or their family to come forward. A man comes forward who, on December 17th around 4:30 in the morning, about a day and a half before Zachary's body was found, stopped on a bridge to help a man who seemed to be having car trouble. It was near where the police believed the boy was thrown into the river. The caller says that the car on the bridge had its parking lights on, so he stopped and asked if everything was okay. The man he asked gave an irrelevant answer and implied that he didn't need help. The caller tells the police that unfortunately he doesn't remember the car's make or license plate. He only provides a vague description of the man. Investigators feel like they haven't made any progress. They decide to look into the man who found the boy's body. As it often happens that a perpetrator reports finding a body to immediately appear as a witness and thus divert any suspicion. The police summons the man for questioning and find out that he has a history of violence. But the questioned man vehemently denies having anything to do with the child's death. He claims that on that evening, he was at an Alcoholics Anonymous meeting. The police check the building where the meeting took place and find blood stains on the bathroom wall. The lead seems very promising, but only laboratory tests will provide information on whether it's Zachary's blood. For now, they have to wait for the results, and until the police receive them, there's no chance of arresting the man. However, he agrees to take a lie detector test and passes it perfectly. Soon, the lab test results come in. It turns out that the blood found did not belong to the boy. Its origin is even explained. It came from different people using the bathroom to take drugs during the Alcoholics Anonymous meeting. The police find themselves back at square one. At the same time, gathering information about the Longo family continues. The police now know that Mary Jane was born in 1967 and grew up with 5 siblings in Ann Arbor, Michigan. Her parents divorced, and the children were raised by their mother in the Jehovah's Witnesses faith. Mary Jane met Christian long ago, when she was in her 20s. It was in Ypsilanti, Michigan, where Christian's family had just moved. Although Christian was only 17 at the time, they shared many things, including their strong faith. Christian was Mary Jane's first true love. The couple got married in 1993. Mary Jane wanted to be an exemplary wife and mother. In 1997, their first child, son Zachary, was born, followed by 2 more girls, Sadie and Madison. Mary Jane adored the children and took very good care of them. She didn't work. Her focus was on raising the children. Christian did everything to ensure his family lived at a high standard. He started a company called Final Touch Construction Cleaning, which dealt with cleaning up after renovations and tidying construction sites. Unfortunately, instead of steadily growing the business, he began investing heavily. At the same time, his family consistently lived beyond their means, leading to financial problems. The company went bankrupt, and the family moved to Newport, where Christian rented an apartment by the sea and took a job at a cafe to make ends meet. It's there that he met Denise, whom he quickly befriended. Denise felt sorry for Christian and Mary Jane, knowing they had no family there and didn't know anyone in town. So she offered to help with childcare so the couple could occasionally go out together, even to the movies or dinner. During her conversation with the police, Denise emphasizes that she has no idea who would want to harm this family. The police also have no specific suspicions. Investigators consider that perhaps this is revenge from someone to whom Christian owed money. Their search becomes even more intense, but there's still no lead. It's December 27th, 8 days have passed, and there's still no trace of Christian, Mary Jane, or their youngest daughter, Madison. From the hotel where the Longo family stayed in the first days in Newport, the police receive a report. A hotel staff member, who was taking out the trash on December 18th, found a family album with the children's birth certificates and Mary Jane's driver's license. Longo was informed then, and he said the children must have thrown it out during their move from the motel to the apartment, dismissing the matter. He never collected the items. The investigators realized that someone like Mary Jane would not likely throw away photo albums of her children. Intuition and experience suggest they searched the water near the building where the Longo family lived. Their suspicions are confirmed. At the bottom near the pier, divers find 2 suitcases, bringing them onto the dock. One of the divers immediately notices hair stuck between the teeth of the suitcase's zipper. In one of the suitcases, the police find Mary Jane's body. In the other, Madison's body. Both the mother's and daughter's bodies show signs of strangulation. Mary Jane is completely naked. It's a shock for everyone, even for the officers who have seen a lot. Mary Jane's family is utterly devastated. Everyone is asking the same question. Where is Christian Longo? Will his body also be found soon? Perhaps even in one of the suitcases? Or did Christian murder his family and then commit suicide? The police decide to talk to Denise once again, the last person who saw the Longo family alive. During the conversation, Denise mentions a detail that previously seemed insignificant. A few days before Zachary's death, while she was taking care of the children, Christian and his wife returned home at night, and Christian seemed distraught. He had red eyes as if he had been crying. Then, a few days later at work, Christian told Denise that his wife had left him. She took the children and left. Denise was very surprised and sympathetic. When she came to work a few days later, Christian wasn't there. His boss told Denise that Christian simply didn't show up at the cafe. Now, Denise speculates that her colleague might have, in a fit of rage, murdered his wife and children and then committed suicide. Friends and co-workers of Christian are outraged by this suggestion. The police, delving deeper into Christian's life, discover that he has a history of fraud. It turns out that when he was running his company and got into debt, he started falsifying checks. When the scheme was uncovered, he was arrested. Although he received a suspended sentence, he was expelled from the church community. Along with him, his wife Mary Jane was also excluded, which deeply affected her. Christian and Mary Jane sold their house at that time and fled Ypsilanti, leaving behind an unpaid $60,000 debt. They first went to Toledo, Ohio, where they moved into an old warehouse undertaking renovations. As part of this, they were allowed to live there without paying rent. Christian began stealing construction materials and tried to resell them. However, one of the clients became suspicious and reported it to the police. Christian managed to escape with his family. The couple left behind many personal belongings they couldn't take in a hurry, including Mary Jane's wedding dress and photo albums. Mary Jane didn't contact her family again, most likely forbidden to do so by Christian. It was yet another time her husband deprived her of what was familiar and dear to her. Mary Jane was like trapped in a cycle. Her family worried about the lack of contact, notified the police, and reported Mary Jane and the children missing. The report was canceled after a postcard arrived from South Dakota, supposedly written by Mary Jane saying, "Everything is fine. Christian is looking for a job. I'll call when we settle." The family couldn't do anything. The investigators now know that Christian is someone entirely different from what they thought, but it's unclear if he's alive and what's happening with him. Unexpectedly, they receive a phone call that surprises everyone. It turns out Christian not only is alive, but apparently doing quite well because he's now applying for a job in San Francisco at the same coffee shop chain where he worked in Newport. From the caller, the investigators learn that Christian provided his Newport employer as a reference for his new job. The manager in San Francisco called Newport to verify, and the Newport branch notified the police. Now it's certain that when searching for Christian, the police are looking for a murderer. The FBI immediately contacts the San Francisco office. Agents are sent to the coffee shop. They hope Christian will show up there soon, but unfortunately he doesn't. It's clear to everyone that Christian is fleeing from justice. However, he's not very careful in covering his tracks. He continues to use a stolen credit card. He buys a plane ticket to Texas and then to Cancun, Mexico. Christian is placed on the FBI's top 10 most wanted list. Cancun and its surroundings are literally covered with posters and flyers featuring his image. They're in public transportation, taxi stands, bus stops, internet cafes, etc. It's the only thing the FBI can do at this point, because other than Christian getting off the plane in Cancun, there's no information about him. It's Sunday, January 13th, 2002. 48 hours have passed since the search in Cancun began. A local tour pilot reports that a few days ago, he transported a man resembling the one in the wanted poster to a campground about 50 miles from Cancun. It's early evening. Agents and Mexican police officers discreetly surround the field. They locate a small cabin, and inside they find Christian. The Mexican police enter, subdue Christian, and bring him outside. Christian claims it's a mistake and says his name is Michael. An FBI agent shows him a flyer with his photo and information about him being wanted as Christian Long Christian. Upon seeing it, confirms his identity. He's officially arrested. It turns out that while in Mexico, Christian pretended to be a New York Times journalist. He hung out in bars and nightclubs, drank alcohol, smoked marijuana, and went diving. He even had a romance with a young German woman who was into photography. The next day, Christian is transported back to the USA. On the plane, an FBI agent sitting next to him strikes up a conversation. He tries to get Christian to confess and tell in detail how he murdered his family. But Christian doesn't admit to anything specific. Although when asked, "Why did you do it?" he answers, "I wanted them to go to a better place." Christian doesn't admit to murdering his children. Even before the trial, he claims he only killed his wife because she killed the children. During the trial, which begins on March 10, 2003, Christian provides the following version of events. When he returned home, he found Mary Jane upset and Madison barely alive. His wife told him she had drowned Zachary and Sadie. Then in a fit of despair and rage, Longo strangled his wife and then began to strangle the already dying Madison. Christian's version of events, where Mary Jane supposedly murdered her children, adds further anguish to her loved ones. They consider it a defamation of her memory, especially as the trial is constantly present in the media. In addition, they live in constant uncertainty whether Christian will indeed be convicted. Many fear that due to the lack of very tangible evidence, Christian, a manipulator and excellent actor, might be acquitted and walk free. But the jury doesn't believe his explanations. And on April 7th, after a 20-minute deliberation, they find Christian Longo guilty of quadruple homicide. A week later, he receives his sentence, death penalty. The later interviews conducted with Christian, who was already in prison, revealed that he committed the murder of his entire family with premeditation. He cited his financial ruin and desire to hide his failure from his loved ones as the motive. Christian admitted that he first suffocated his wife and then his daughter, and then disposed of their bodies in water, into suitcases. He then took his remaining children to another location and also killed them. Journalist Michael Finkel, whom Christian impersonated in Mexico, had previously contacted Longo and conducted interviews with him in prison. Based on these interviews, Finkel wrote the book True Story, Murder Memoir, Mea Culpa, which was published in 2005. The film True Story from 2015 was also based on this book. I think we see that. Respect to the defense offer of proof of the statement. In every instance, the court granted our motion to quash and did not compel the production of the records. In herself that a research, if allowed, might result in certain information being developed. The use of subpoenas under such circumstances is enough. To my understanding, he's charged with superseding indictment for the defendant. I felt that. At the outset, I reasoned that this was something that she needed. I think internally I was probably thinking more about, what am I going to say to people now that our Ford Taurus has been taken? They're certainly not going to see this car driving around. It was a pride issue with me as much as I think an inconvenience to Mary Jane. I would think about my comfort and the comfort of the kids over her, or the comfort of anybody else over her own. The Ford Taurus she regarded as a comfort for her. Allow her to. They gave me an ultimatum at that point. They said I was still fairly adamant that I wanted to date Mary Jane, and they essentially said you can either live under our roof, or you can date Mary Jane, and I chose to move out that next week. 18 plus 1 week and a half or so. Was that working out for you? Sure was. It worked out pretty well. Had little to no sleep. But outside of that, the contractor was happy that we started working with. And that led to more contractors, which led to us switching into management as opposed to laborers. And ended up, at this time, the court calls for trial of the matter of State of Oregon versus Christian Michael Longo. More than a year after his family's murder, Christian Longo finally faces a jury, his parents looking on from the crowded Lincoln County courtroom. Prosecutors reminded jurors of the victims. The state argues Mary Jane Longo confronted her husband about an affair he was having months before the murders. The defendant tells her that he doesn't love her anymore, that he stopped loving her when she started having children. Story 2. Crime fiction narrative, Italy, 2020. The narrow, cobblestone streets of Naples gleamed faintly under the pale glow of street lamps, slick from the night's lingering rain, reflecting a city caught in a quiet tension. In the year 2020, Italy's southern heart was a maze of history and shadows, where the old and the new clashed in a complex dance. The sound of distant sirens mingled with the occasional shout from restless late-night passers-by. Detective Sofia Romano stepped cautiously through the labyrinthine alleys of the Quartiere Spagnoli, the Spanish Quarters, an area both vibrant and dangerous, known for its dense population and whispered secrets. She had just received an anonymous tip about a shipment arriving tonight, one that could potentially dismantle a dangerous human trafficking ring that had long plagued the region. The usual bustle was subdued, but the undercurrent of illicit activity was palpable. Crime in many forms wove itself into everyday life here, from petty theft to the more sinister dealings of the Camorra, the powerful mafia that held a grip on Naples and beyond. Sofia's investigation began months earlier, tracing the disappearance of young women and men from impoverished neighborhoods who never returned home. The traffickers used the city's busy port as their gateway, smuggling victims into forced labor and sexual exploitation across Europe. Tonight's tip suggested something bigger, a new player in the trafficking game, moving beyond old alliances, with ambitions that threatened to redraw the city's criminal map. As she crept closer to the docks, her breath visible in the cold night air, her mind raced through every piece of information she had gathered. The scent of salt water mixed with diesel fumes, and the rhythmic clinking of chains on cargo containers created an eerie soundtrack. Her informant had warned of a meeting between rival factions, where illegal goods would change hands, goods that were more human than material. Suddenly, from the shadows emerged a figure, draped in a dark coat, face obscured by a scarf. "You're late," the voice whispered harshly. Sofia recognized it immediately. Marco Vitali, a low-level informant with connections to the Camorra, but a fragile loyalty to the law. "They're unloading the shipment on Pier 7, he said, glancing nervously over his shoulder. "But it's guarded heavily. You'll need backup." Sofia nodded, signaling to her team waiting discreetly nearby. The operation had to be swift. The traffickers were ruthless and well-armed, with a network of lookout points and escape routes mapped with military precision. Every step was a gamble between catching the criminals and becoming a victim herself. She felt the weight of the city's eyes on her, a mixture of hope and fear. As the team moved into position, the dockworkers' chatter faded into tense silence. Containers shifted, trucks idled, and shadowy men communicated through coded hand signals. The cargo hold opened, revealing cramped, terrified faces pressed against the metal walls, victims barely conscious, trapped in the hellish confines of human greed. Sofia's heart clenched, but she forced herself to remain focused. Suddenly a sharp crack echoed, a gunshot. Chaos erupted. The traffickers, alerted to the raid, scrambled to escape. Bullets pierced the night as Sofia and her team dove for cover, returning fire. The standoff lasted minutes that felt like hours, until backup arrived, overwhelming the criminals and securing the victims. In the aftermath, Sofia moved among the survivors, offering water and whispered reassurances. Many were too shocked to speak, but their eyes told stories of horror and resilience. Back at the precinct, under the harsh fluorescent lights, Sofia sifted through evidence, passports, forged documents, encrypted phones, uncovering a sophisticated operation that linked local crime bosses to international syndicates. The case was bigger than she had feared, a sprawling web that crossed borders and defied easy justice. Yet, amid the bureaucratic hurdles and threats to her own safety, Sofia found renewed determination. This city, with all its beauty and brutality, was worth fighting for. As dawn broke over the Bay of Naples, she looked out toward the rising sun, knowing that the battle against darkness was far from over. But this night's victory was a beacon, fragile but vital, in the relentless fight for justice. The days that followed the raid blurred into a relentless cycle of interviews, forensic analysis, and endless paperwork, yet the shadow of danger loomed large over Detective Sofia Romano. The human trafficking ring she had helped dismantle was just a single thread in a vast tapestry of crime that threatened to unravel Naples' fragile social fabric. New intelligence suggested that while one operation had been crushed, another was already blossoming in the outskirts of the city, a more clandestine network, leveraging technology and corruption in ways Sofia had never seen before. The criminals were adapting quickly, moving beyond the docks to exploit the growing anonymity of the digital world. Sofia's phone buzzed constantly with encrypted messages and warnings from informants who feared for their lives. Each piece of information seemed to open a new layer of complexity, a deeper trench of moral ambiguity and danger. One evening, as she reviewed surveillance footage in the dim light of her office, Sophia caught sight of a familiar face. A man known only as Il Lupo, the Wolf, a notorious fixer whose name whispered through Naples' underground with a mixture of reverence and dread. His role was pivotal, orchestrating deals, silencing witnesses, and ensuring the machinery of crime ran smoothly. Tracking him down was like chasing a ghost. Every lead ended in a dead end or worse, betrayal. But Sophia knew that to truly dismantle the trafficking network, she had to get close to him. The risk was colossal, but the alternative was letting the city's youth fall prey to merciless exploitation. She reached out to Marco Vitali, her reluctant informant, who reluctantly agreed to help infiltrate Il Lupo's circle, a dangerous game that could cost them both their lives. Over the next few weeks, Sophia and Marco navigated the murky corridors of Naples' criminal underworld, attending smoky backroom meetings and exchanging coded messages with shadowy figures. The tension was suffocating, trust was scarce, and deception lurked behind every smile. One night, while meeting a contact in a derelict warehouse near the waterfront, Sophia narrowly escaped an ambush that left Marco wounded and deepened her resolve. The stakes had never been higher. Every move was watched, every conversation monitored. Yet the detective's determination grew fiercer, fueled by the faces of those she had rescued and those she had yet to save. The city's ancient stones bore witness to this invisible war, a clash between darkness and light beneath the surface of everyday life. Then, unexpectedly, a breakthrough came from the least likely place. An encrypted message sent to Sophia's anonymous tip line, containing information about an upcoming shipment of trafficked victims moving through the nearby airport. It was a bold move by the criminals, showing either desperation or overconfidence. Sophia mobilized her team, coordinating with airport security and immigration officers to set a trap. The operation was fraught with challenges, from bureaucratic red tape to the need for absolute secrecy. The criminals had eyes everywhere, and one false move could trigger a violent retaliation that would plunge the city into chaos. Yet, when the shipment was intercepted and the victims were freed, the ripple effect was immediate. The traffickers' network fractured, alliances crumbled, and whispers of a new era in Naples' criminal landscape spread like wildfire. But victory came at a cost. Sophia faced threats not just from the criminals, but from within the system, where corruption and fear often hindered justice. She had to navigate a treacherous path, balancing the demands of her job with the safety of her loved ones. Yet, in the face of overwhelming odds, her unwavering commitment shone through. As the sun set over the Bay of Naples, casting a golden hue over the city, Sophia Romano stood on the cliffs overlooking the sea, contemplating the battles fought and those yet to come. The fight against crime was never-ending, a relentless pursuit of truth and justice in a world where shadows always lurked. But for now, in this fragile moment, the city breathed a little easier, and hope, however tentative, glimmered on the horizon. The fragile calm that followed the airport operation was shattered just days later. Sophia's phone rang in the dead of night, the caller ID blocked, a chilling signature she had come to dread. The voice on the other end was cold, methodical, and unmistakably Il Lupo's. "You may have won a battle, detective, but the war is far from over," he warned, his words echoing in her mind long after the call ended. It was a stark reminder that the enemy was still out there, regrouping, striking from the shadows. The city's labyrinthine streets, its ancient piazzas, and even its sunlit cafes became battlegrounds where danger could erupt at any moment. Determined not to be intimidated, Sophia doubled down on her investigation, following leads that pointed to a deeper conspiracy involving not just traffickers, but corrupt officials embedded within the law enforcement hierarchy. The betrayal stung deeply, undermining the very foundation of justice she had sworn to uphold. Each revelation peeled back another layer of deceit, from bribed judges to compromised prosecutors, all weaving a complex web that shielded the criminal syndicates from prosecution. Yet Sophia's resolve only hardened. She was no stranger to solitude in this fight. Her closest allies were few, and trust was a rare commodity. Marco, still recovering from his injuries, remained by her side, a constant reminder of the price they paid for justice. One particularly grim evening, Sophia found herself deep in a clandestine meeting beneath the city, in the catacombs that stretched beneath Naples like the veins of a living organism. Here, amidst the damp stone walls and flickering candlelight, she met a whistleblower from the judiciary, a man risking everything to expose the corruption choking the system. His testimony was explosive, naming names that sent shockwaves through the city's political and legal establishments. Sophia knew that this was the turning point. The operation to dismantle the network was no longer just a police matter. It had become a fight for the soul of Naples itself. But as the investigation intensified, so did the threats. Anonymous letters slipped under her door, tires slashed on her car, and a shadowy figure tailed her every move. The criminals were ruthless, and the stakes had never been higher. Yet in the heart of this darkness, Sophia found unexpected strength. The community she served began to rally, victims' families, local activists, even ordinary citizens who had grown tired of living in fear. Their voices, once silenced by intimidation, now joined hers in a chorus demanding justice. The media, initially skeptical, took up the cause, shining a harsh light on the corruption and crime that had thrived in the city's underbelly. In the end, it was a dramatic raid on a secluded villa in the hills above Naples that marked the climax of Sophia's crusade. Surrounded by mountains and overlooking the glittering lights of the city below, the villa was a fortress for the syndicate's leaders, a place where deals were struck and lives shattered. The operation was precise and swift, with law enforcement officers moving in under the cover of darkness, catching the criminals off guard. As Sophia led the breach, she felt a surge of adrenaline, a mix of fear, determination, and the hope that this would finally bring an end to the nightmare. The arrest of Il Lupo and his closest associates sent shockwaves through Naples, dismantling the trafficking ring and exposing the rotten core of corruption. Yet, as Sophia stood amidst the wreckage of that final confrontation, she understood that crime never truly vanished. It merely evolved, adapting to new realities and hiding in new shadows. The victory was bittersweet, a testament to resilience, but also a reminder of the endless battle against human greed and cruelty. Naples would heal, slowly, bruised but unbroken, and Detective Sofia Romano, weary but unyielding, would be there to face whatever new darkness emerged from the depths. For in the city of 1,000 stories, where beauty and danger intertwined like lovers in a dance, justice was a flame that could never be extinguished. Let's jump to next story. Story 3. The narrow cobblestone streets of Naples twisted and curled like the coils of a serpent, hiding secrets in every shadow, and on this humid evening in the summer of 2016, the city seemed to hold its breath, waiting for something dark to unfold. The scent of stale espresso mixed with the salty sea air, while neon signs flickered intermittently above shuttered trattorias, casting jagged shadows against crumbling brick walls. It was the kind of night where the past and present intertwined, where the ghosts of the city's notorious underworld whispered through alleyways and the restless souls of forgotten victims lingered just out of sight. Amid the chaos of late-night scooters weaving past vendors packing up their stalls, Detective Marco Bellini stood silently at the edge of the Piazza del Plebiscito, his gaze fixed on the imposing facade of the royal palace. The crime that had brought him here wasn't the usual fare, no petty theft or street brawl, but a meticulously planned heist that had rattled even the most hardened officers of the Polizia di Stato. A priceless artifact, an ancient relic rumored to hold a secret map to lost treasures, had vanished from the Naples Museum of History, taken in a daring robbery that left no trace, except for one chilling clue: a single playing card left at the scene, the ace of spades. Bellini had spent the last 3 days immersed in the underbelly of the city, following leads that led him through smoky backrooms of cafes where whispers were exchanged in hushed tones, to the seedy docks where smugglers unloaded crates in the dead of night. Each step took him deeper into the tangled web of Naples' criminal syndicates, the Camorra, whose grip on the city was ironclad and ruthless. This wasn't just a theft, it was a message, a challenge thrown down by an unknown adversary who dared to mock the law and those who enforced it. The detective's mind raced as he pieced together fragments of overheard conversations and cryptic notes left behind. The card, Bellini knew, was a signature, a calling card of the elusive group known only as Il Mazzo, or the Deck, a shadowy organization that played a deadly game of power and deception. Rumors suggested that Il Mazzo was behind a string of high-profile crimes across Italy, but no one had ever seen their leaders, and their motives remained an enigma. As Bellini stepped away from the piazza, the chatter of the city faded behind him, replaced by the soft echo of his footsteps against the uneven stones. His phone buzzed, a message from Sofia, his informant embedded in one of the city's notorious gambling dens. "They're planning something big," she warned cryptically. The detective's jaw tightened. If Il Mazzo was escalating, Naples was on the brink of chaos. He recalled the last encounter with Sofia, a fragile alliance built on trust and mutual necessity. She had eyes and ears everywhere, but dealt with a dangerous game herself, trapped between loyalty and survival. Bellini wondered if she could truly be trusted, or if she was playing a deeper game, just like the criminals he hunted. With a sigh, he pulled his coat tighter against the damp night, and made his way toward the Quartieri Spagnoli, the labyrinthine Spanish quarters where whispers of an upcoming rendezvous circulated like wildfire. Somewhere in those maze-like streets, he hoped to find a clue, a thread to unravel the mystery before the city was consumed by the violence he feared. The deeper into the neighborhood he walked, the heavier the air grew with tension. The flickering street lamps illuminated graffiti-covered walls, some depicting playing cards, others threatening warnings painted in bold strokes. La Manomir, the hand dies. The locals eyed him warily, their faces a mixture of suspicion and fear. Bellini knew that to break this case, he had to navigate a world where alliances shifted like sand, and betrayal was as common as the sea breeze. Suddenly, the sharp sound of a motorcycle engine broke the silence, and a figure clad in black zipped past him, disappearing down a side street. Bellini's instincts kicked in. Was this an ally or a scout from Il Mazzo? He quickened his pace, eyes scanning the shadows for movement. Somewhere nearby, the city's dangerous game was unfolding, and Bellini was determined to be the one who called checkmate. The labyrinthine alleys of the Quartieri Spagnoli seemed to close in on Detective Marco Bellini as he pursued the shadowy figure on the motorcycle, his heart pounding not only from the chase, but from the mounting weight of uncertainty that had become his constant companion. Every twist and turn brought him deeper into a tangle of narrow passages lined with peeling plaster and iron balconies draped with drying laundry. The very fabric of Naples' oldest neighborhoods, where tradition and danger were inseparable. The motorbike vanished into a courtyard bathed in the flicker of a dying street lamp, and Bellini slowed, his senses sharpened. He scanned the dim space, spotting only a group of young men huddled around a makeshift fire, their faces etched with suspicion as they regarded the outsider in their midst. Bellini's voice broke the silence, low but steady. "I'm looking for someone connected to Il Mazzo. Anyone who knows about the Ace of Spades." The men exchanged glances, their expressions guarded but tinged with something else. Curiosity, perhaps, or the thrill of danger. One stepped forward, his eyes reflecting the firelight, and whispered, "Il Mazzo doesn't like strangers poking around. But there's talk of a meeting tonight, at the old Teatro San Carlo. Midnight." The detective nodded slowly, realizing this was the lead he needed. The ancient Teatro San Carlo, with its ornate facade and faded grandeur, had long ceased to host the operas and ballets that once enchanted aristocrats. Instead, it had become a haven for clandestine dealings, a place where shadows danced as dangerously as the performers once did on its stage. Bellini knew that tonight, the city's criminal elite would converge there, their secrets laid bare in whispers and threats. It was a risk, but one he was willing to take. As midnight approached, Bellini parked his car several blocks away and crept toward the theater, his footsteps muffled against the cracked pavement. The heavy wooden doors stood slightly ajar, revealing a glimpse of the dimly lit interior, where silhouettes moved like ghosts against peeling wallpaper and crumbling plaster. Inside, the air was thick with the scent of sweat, tobacco, and the unmistakable tension of impending confrontation. Bellini's eyes adjusted to the gloom, catching sight of a semicircle of figures seated in velvet chairs, faces obscured by shadows and cigarette smoke. The room hummed with quiet menace, the language of power, betrayal, and survival. Suddenly, the silence was shattered by a sharp voice slicing through the murmur. "You brought the detective." A woman stepped forward, her eyes cold and calculating. "Sophia." Bellini's pulse quickened, but he maintained his composure. "I'm here for answers," he said evenly. "Who is behind Il Mazzo? What do you want with the Ace of Spades?" Sophia smiled thinly, a flicker of something unreadable in her gaze. Il Mazzo is more than a gang, Marco. It's a game where the stakes are the fate of this city. The ace is just the beginning. Those who hold the cards decide who lives and who dies. You want to survive in Naples? Learn to play. Before Bellini could respond, the doors burst open, and a group of armed men stormed in, their faces masked, their weapons gleaming ominously. Chaos erupted. Gunshots echoed off the walls, shouts mingled with screams, and the fragile balance of power shattered like glass. Bellini ducked behind a row of seats, heart hammering, as bullets tore through the air. He caught a glimpse of Sophia, fighting fiercely, her calm facade broken by desperation. The battle for control of Naples' criminal underworld had erupted into open war, and in the midst of it all, Bellini realized the true cost of the game. Trust was a luxury no one could afford, and every move could be the last. Let's jump to next story. Story 4. In the waning light of a late autumn afternoon, the ancient city of Florence seemed to hold a deceptive calm, its Renaissance facades glowing softly in the amber hues of sunset, belying the storm that brewed beneath its polished surface. The Arno River flowed steadily through the heart of the city, reflecting the silhouette of Ponte Vecchio, its once bustling shops now shuttered for the evening, as if the city itself were bracing for something unspeakable. Detective Alessio Romano stood at the edge of Piazza della Signoria, his tall frame casting a long shadow on the cobblestones. The case that had brought him here was as tangled and delicate as the intricate frescoes adorning the Palazzo Vecchio, a disappearance that had shaken Florence's elite to its core. Isabella Moretti, the daughter of a powerful art dealer, had vanished without a trace from her family's villa on the outskirts of the city, and whispers of kidnapping and ransom rippled through the narrow streets like a dangerous undercurrent. Romano was no stranger to Florence's underworld, a realm where art and crime often intersected in a complicated dance of greed, loyalty, and desperation. The theft of priceless paintings, forged masterpieces, and secret deals in shadowed galleries had been his battleground for years, but this case felt different. It wasn't merely about stolen goods or illicit auctions, it was personal. The Moretti family was entwined with the city's most influential figures, their connections stretching from the Vatican to the highest echelons of political power. The detective's investigation led him through a maze of velvet-draped rooms and marble corridors, where secrets were kept behind smiles and behind locked doors. Every lead was a puzzle piece that revealed more questions than answers, and the deeper he delved, the more he realized that Isabella's disappearance was the key to unraveling a much larger conspiracy. As night fell, the streets of Florence transformed into a labyrinth of shadows and murmurs. The scent of freshly baked bread mingled with the distant melody of a violin, while couples strolled beneath the golden glow of street lamps, unaware of the dark dealings unfolding just beyond their view. Romano found himself in a dimly lit cafe near the Santa Croce, where his informant, a former art thief turned reluctant collaborator named Enzo, nursed a glass of Chianti, his eyes flickering with caution. "The Moretti girl isn't just missing," Enzo murmured, his voice barely above the clatter of cups and the murmur of other patrons. "She's a pawn in a game that involves the city's most dangerous players. There's talk of a clandestine auction, where priceless artifacts and secrets are sold to the highest bidder. Isabella's father crossed someone powerful, and now the price is her life." Romano's mind raced, the pieces falling into place with agonizing slowness. The clandestine auction was rumored to be held in an abandoned villa hidden deep in the Tuscan countryside, a place whispered about in criminal circles as Il Castello Nero, the Black Castle, a fortress of corruption and betrayal. The detective knew that time was running out. Every hour Isabella remained captive increased the likelihood that she would never see freedom again. The chill of the evening air seeped through his coat as he stepped outside, eyes scanning the horizon where the city's ancient towers rose against the night sky. Somewhere out there, in the cold silence of the villa, Isabella was trapped, and somewhere else, men and women cloaked in wealth and power were plotting moves that would shake Florence to its core. With resolve hardening in his chest, Romano vowed to untangle the web of deceit and bring the missing girl home, no matter what darkness he had to confront. The journey from Florence to the Tuscan countryside was a slow, deliberate passage from the city's ornate beauty to a landscape scarred by both history and secrecy. The winding roads, flanked by gnarled olive trees and vineyards heavy with ripe grapes, seemed to close in on Detective Alessio Romano as the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky with streaks of crimson and violet. The abandoned villa known as Il Castello Nero was rumored to be hidden amidst this serene terrain, its dark silhouette a stark contrast against the fading light. A fortress not just of stone, but of whispered lies and ruthless ambitions. Romano's car rumbled quietly over the gravel as he approached, the weight of what awaited pressing down on him like the dense Tuscan fog that was beginning to roll in. Every instinct told him this would be no ordinary rescue. This was a confrontation with the very heart of Florence's corrupt elite, where art, power, and blood intertwined in a deadly tapestry. Romano parked beneath a twisted cypress tree and crept forward, the villa's broken windows and ivy-choked walls looming like the carcass of a once magnificent beast. The silence was almost unnatural, broken only by the distant howl of a lone wolf and the faint rustle of leaves in the cold night air. He moved cautiously, flashlight beam cutting through the shadows as he slipped through the heavy iron gates, every step echoing ominously on the cracked stone path. Inside, the air was thick with dust and the scent of decay, mingling with something sharper, fear and anticipation. The vast rooms, once adorned with frescoes and chandeliers, were now stripped bare, save for a handful of masked figures gathered around a long oak table cluttered with papers, auction catalogs, and bottles of expensive wine. The tension was palpable, each glance loaded with suspicion and menace. Romano's heart thundered as he watched from the shadows, taking in the faces of those who held Florence's darkest secrets: art dealers with blood-stained hands, politicians whose smiles masked deadly agendas, and hired mercenaries with cold, unflinching eyes. The auction was underway, and with it, the fate of Isabella Moretti. She was there too, bound and gagged in a corner, her eyes wide with a mixture of terror and defiance. As the bidding began, the room filled with hushed whispers and the clinking of glasses, Romano felt the weight of the city's sins pressing down on him. Every item sold was more than just a piece of art. It was a testament to greed, betrayal, and the high cost of ambition. When a rare manuscript changed hands for a sum that could ransom a dozen lives, Romano knew he had to act. The fragile balance could shatter at any moment. With a surge of resolve, he stepped out of the shadows, gun drawn, voice cutting through the tense atmosphere like a blade. "Police! Everyone stay where you are." Chaos erupted instantly. The room exploded into shouts and panic as masked figures lunged for weapons, bottles shattered, and the echo of gunfire rang through the crumbling halls. Romano's training kept him steady amid the storm, his eyes locked on Isabella as he fought his way through the chaos. The struggle was brutal, a desperate fight against overwhelming odds where every second counted. When the dust settled, the villa was a scene of ruin and silence, broken only by the ragged breaths of the survivors. Isabella was free, trembling but alive, and Romano knew that although this night's battle was won, the war for Florence's soul was far from over. As dawn broke over the Tuscan hills, painting the sky with pale light, he vowed to continue the fight, to bring the darkness to light, one shadow at a time. The morning after the raid at Il Castello Nero brought no relief to Detective Alessio Romano. The early Tuscan light, soft and golden as it filtered through the cracked windows of the police station in Florence, did little to warm the chill that had settled in his bones. Isabella Moretti was safe now, wrapped in a thick blanket and guarded closely, but the questions that haunted Romano refused to fade. Who exactly had orchestrated the auction? Which of the city's powerful elites had their hands stained with the desperation and cruelty that held her captive? The list of suspects was as vast and shadowed as the ancient alleyways he'd walked countless times, and every lead seemed to draw him deeper into a web of lies that could engulf not only Florence's criminal underbelly, but the very institutions sworn to protect it. Romano sat across from Isabella in the interrogation room, her delicate frame a stark contrast to the grim sterility of the space. Her eyes, though tired, carried a spark of defiance that both unsettled and inspired him. Slowly, she began to unravel the story, a tale of betrayal that cut through the city's golden veneer. Her father, it seemed, had stumbled onto a secret network trafficking not just stolen art, but forged political documents and bribes designed to manipulate elections and silence dissent. When he refused to comply, his family became the target, and Isabella's kidnapping was the cruel message meant to force his hand. Each word she spoke added weight to the case, but also danger. They were not dealing with petty criminals or desperate thieves. This was a conspiracy wrapped in silk and gold, hidden behind masks of civility and tradition. Outside, the city stirred awake, unaware of the silent war waged in its shadows. Romano knew the investigation would not only test his resolve, but his very faith in justice. The streets where tourists marveled at Michelangelo's David and the Duomo's soaring dome were the same streets where greed and power played their ruthless games. As he pieced together the evidence, bank transfers disguised as art purchases, coded messages hidden in gallery invoices, clandestine meetings in opulent palazzos, he understood that the stakes were higher than he'd imagined. The next move would come from those desperate to maintain control, and it would not be subtle. The detective's only hope was to stay one step ahead, to navigate the fragile alliances and deadly rivalries with the cunning of a chess player, knowing full well that one wrong move could cost him everything. That evening, as the city's lanterns flickered to life and the scent of jasmine drifted through the narrow streets, Romano found himself once again standing beneath the arches of Ponte Vecchio. The river's dark waters whispered secrets, carrying away the sins of centuries. He glanced toward the Palazzo Vecchio, its tower silhouetted against the stars, a silent sentinel watching over the unfolding drama. Somewhere in its depths, the true puppet masters pulled their strings, and Romano vowed that he would expose them. For Isabella, for Florence, and for the fragile hope that justice, however battered, might still prevail in a city where art and crime danced eternally in the shadows. Let's jump to next story. Story 5. The narrow streets of Naples in early 2013 were alive with the restless pulse of a city caught between its turbulent past and a fragile hope for redemption. Amid the cacophony of honking scooters, shouting vendors, and the scent of fresh espresso mingling with the salty air from the nearby bay, a darker story unfolded. One of betrayal, power, and ruthless ambition lurking beneath the city's sun-drenched facade. Detective Lucia Moretti had returned to her hometown after years in Milan, drawn back by whispers of a crime syndicate growing bolder and more violent than anything Naples had seen in decades. The Camorra, long a shadowy presence weaving through the city's veins, had begun a new chapter of terror, targeting not just rivals but innocents who dared to cross their path. Moretti's first case after her transfer was a chilling murder that shook the heart of the old city. The brutal slaying of a respected journalist who had been investigating corruption tied to Naples' most powerful families. The investigation led Moretti deep into the labyrinth of Naples' backstreets and forgotten courtyards, places where ancient buildings leaned precariously over narrow alleys, their walls scarred with graffiti and memories of violence. The journalist, Marco Esposito, had been found near the Castel Nuovo, his body left as a brutal message, eyes wide open, mouth twisted in a silent scream, a single playing card tucked into his jacket pocket. It was a signature, a calling card from the syndicate's elusive leader, known only as Il Fantasma. The ghost, whose real identity was a mystery, whispered about in fearful tones but never confirmed. Moretti's work was painstaking, unraveling coded phone calls, clandestine meetings in dimly lit cafes, and silent threats that dripped like poison into the lives of those brave enough to seek justice. The line between ally and enemy blurred constantly, as loyalty in Naples was as fragile as the cracked cobblestones underfoot. With every step, Moretti uncovered a city fractured by desperation and silence, where families lived in fear and the rule of law was more a suggestion than a guarantee. The police precinct where she worked was under constant pressure, infiltrated by informants and shadowed by corruption that made every decision a gamble. Yet, Moretti's resolve burned bright. The loss of Esposito was personal. He had been her friend, a rare voice speaking truth to power, and now his death was a rallying cry that drove her deeper into the heart of the conspiracy. As she pieced together the network of money laundering, illegal arms deals, and political bribery, it became clear that the murder was only the beginning. The Camorra's reach extended beyond Naples, weaving through Rome and Milan, threatening to ignite a war that could consume the entire country. In the fading light of an overcast afternoon, Moretti stood on the edge of Piazza del Plebiscito, the imposing columns and statues looming like silent witnesses to the city's secrets, and vowed that she would bring the ghost to justice, no matter the cost. The days that followed plunged Detective Lucia Moretti into a relentless pursuit of shadows, chasing fragments of truth through the tangled web of Naples' criminal underworld. Each lead pulled her deeper into a maze of deceit and violence, where friends turned foes, and every whispered conversation could be a trap. The Camorra's grip on the city was suffocating, their influence seeping into local government offices, police departments, and even the courtrooms that were supposed to uphold justice. Moretti found herself constantly looking over her shoulder, haunted by the knowledge that Il Fantasma was not just a myth, but a calculating predator watching from the darkness. Her every move was monitored, every phone call potentially compromised, yet surrender was never an option. The weight of Marco Esposito's death pressed on her like a stone in her chest, a constant reminder of what was at stake, the fragile hope for a Naples free from fear and corruption. Her investigation uncovered a disturbing pattern, a series of clandestine shipments arriving at the port, unmarked containers filled with weapons and cash moving under the guise of legitimate trade. These shipments funded the syndicate's brutal campaign, arming their enforcers who silenced dissent with ruthless efficiency. Moretti's team worked tirelessly, staking out docks under the cover of darkness, tailing suspicious vehicles through narrow alleyways slick with rain, and decrypting encrypted messages that revealed a chilling code of violence. The city's ancient beauty was juxtaposed with the cold modernity of crime, where technology became a weapon and loyalty was bought and sold like contraband. As she delved further, Moretti realized that to confront Il Fantasma, she would have to infiltrate his world, becoming a ghost herself, a shadow slipping unseen through the city's blood-soaked streets. The turning point came on a foggy evening when an informant, a low-ranking member of the syndicate, known only as Il Ragazzo, reached out with a secret meeting place deep in the Quartiere Spagnoli. The narrow staircases and cramped apartments of this neighborhood had long been a refuge for those on the run, a place where silence spoke louder than words. Moretti met Il Ragazzo in a dimly lit trattoria, the air heavy with the aroma of garlic and wine, her heart pounding as he divulged names, dates, and locations, fragments of a plan to expand the Camorra's influence into Rome's political heart. His information was both a lifeline and a death sentence. Anyone caught leaking secrets to the police vanished without a trace. Yet, armed with this knowledge, Moretti prepared for the most dangerous phase of her investigation, a daring sting operation that would expose Il Fantasma and his inner circle. As the city held its breath beneath a sky heavy with rain, she knew that the coming days would test her courage, her loyalty, and the fragile line between justice and revenge in the shadowed streets of Naples. The night air hung heavy with tension as Detective Lucia Moretti prepared for the operation that could finally unmask Il Fantasma and dismantle the Camorra's stranglehold on Naples. The city's usual restless energy was replaced by an eerie stillness, as if even the streets themselves held their breath in anticipation. Under the cloak of darkness, Moretti and her small team navigated the winding alleys of the Spanish quarters, their footsteps muffled by the damp cobblestones slick with recent rain. The target was a clandestine meeting set to take place inside an old, abandoned warehouse near the port, a place once bustling with fishermen and merchants, now decayed and overtaken by shadows. Intelligence gathered from Il Ragazzo indicated that Il Fantasma's closest lieutenants would be present, negotiating the next phase of their criminal empire's expansion. Every detail was critical. One mistake could mean the end, not just for the mission, but for Moretti herself. Inside the warehouse, flickering lights revealed a tableau of menace and power, suited men speaking in low tones, their faces obscured by the smoke of expensive cigars, while armed guards paced restlessly near crates marked with foreign symbols. The atmosphere was thick with distrust and greed, the air charged with the electricity of impending violence. Moretti's heart hammered in her chest as she moved silently with her team, cameras recording, radios crackling in hushed bursts of static. Suddenly, a shadow shifted near the entrance. A guard had spotted movement. The tension snapped like a wire under strain, and chaos exploded in a deafening roar. Shots rang out, glass shattered, and the stench of gunpowder filled the air as Moretti's team fought to contain the eruption of violence. In the frantic melee, Moretti caught a glimpse of a figure slipping away through a back exit. Il Fantasma himself, vanishing like a ghost into the labyrinthine streets. The aftermath was grim. Several of Moretti's team were injured, and key suspects escaped into the night, but the operation yielded something invaluable: documents and encrypted files that hinted at the syndicate's deepest secrets. Back at the precinct, the detective pored over the evidence, eyes bloodshot from hours of study. The files revealed a shocking network of corruption reaching far beyond Naples. Politicians, businessmen, even law enforcement officials entangled in the web spun by Il Fantasma. The city was more than just a battleground. It was a chessboard, with pieces moved by unseen hands. Moretti understood then that her fight was no longer just about justice. It was about survival, and about saving a city that seemed poised on the brink of collapse. As dawn broke over the Bay of Naples, casting pale light over Vesuvius' looming shadow, she steeled herself for the long road ahead. The ghost might have escaped tonight, but his time was running out. Let's jump to next story. Story 6. The sun dipped low over the Venetian canals in the late summer of 2021, casting a golden shimmer across the water's surface, while shadows began to creep through the labyrinthine streets of one of Italy's most enchanting yet enigmatic cities. Venice, with its timeless beauty and centuries-old secrets, seemed an unlikely stage for a crime that would shake the foundations of its delicate peace. Yet beneath the elegant facades and the soft lull of gondolas drifting past ancient palazzos, a darker story was unfolding, one woven with greed, deceit, and a thirst for power that knew no bounds. Inspector Marco Ferrara had spent years navigating the complex tapestry of Venetian society, where art, history, and crime were inextricably linked. Now, as the city cautiously emerged from the shadow of the global pandemic, Ferrara found himself facing a case that threatened to unravel not just his career, but the very soul of Venice itself. The discovery of a prominent antiquities dealer's body in a secluded palazzo on the edge of the Cannaregio district sent ripples through the city's tightly knit elite. Alessandro Vianello was a man revered for his connections, a gatekeeper to treasures that spanned epochs, from Byzantine mosaics to Renaissance sculptures, whose dealings were rumored to straddle the fine line between legitimate commerce and illicit trafficking. His death, violent and abrupt, hinted at a message far more sinister than a simple robbery gone wrong. The scene was chilling. Vianello found slumped over his antique desk, a single ornate dagger protruding from his back, surrounded by scattered papers and broken glass, the faint scent of expensive perfume lingering in the heavy Venetian air. As Ferrara stood there, the weight of centuries of Venetian history seemed to press down upon him, the city's gilded past now shadowed by a deadly present. Every artifact in the palazzo whispered secrets of power struggles and betrayals, and Ferrara knew that to solve this murder, he would have to pierce the elegant veil of society and confront the ruthless ambitions lurking beneath. The investigation quickly revealed a tangled web of connections, extending from the narrow canals of Venice to the bustling ports of Trieste and the cosmopolitan galleries of Milan. Vianello's business was more than an obsession with art. It was a front for an underground network trafficking stolen artifacts and forged documents, a shadow market that financed some of the most dangerous criminal organizations in Europe. Ferrara's team uncovered coded communications hinting at an imminent auction, where priceless objects were to be sold to the highest bidder, their origins erased by layers of forgery and deceit. The inspector moved carefully, aware that his every step was being watched by those desperate to protect their secrets. Among the suspects were influential figures cloaked in legitimacy, a wealthy industrialist with ties to Eastern Europe, a curator rumored to have falsified provenance certificates, and even a high-ranking official within the Venetian Cultural Heritage Department. As Ferrara navigated this perilous maze, the lines between ally and enemy blurred, and trust became a luxury he could ill afford. The case was no longer just about justice for Alessandro Vianello. It was a battle to preserve the fragile soul of a city where the past and present collided in shadows and whispers. As the investigation deepened, Inspector Marco Ferrara found himself drawn into a clandestine world where Venice's shimmering beauty masked the ruthless calculus of crime and corruption. The glittering canals, once silent witnesses to the city's glory, now reflected the darker currents swirling beneath, currents that threatened to engulf not just the art world, but the very fabric of Venetian society. The auction loomed closer, a shadowy event organized in the underground catacombs of an ancient church on the island of San Michele, where stolen treasures were to be exchanged in whispers and secret handshakes. Ferrara's informants were scarce and unreliable, their loyalty bought with fear or greed, and every tip seemed laced with deception. He spent sleepless nights poring over surveillance footage, tracing cryptic bank transfers, and interrogating suspects who veiled their truths behind rehearsed alibis and guarded eyes. The inspector knew that infiltrating the auction would be his most dangerous gamble, one that demanded a blend of cunning, courage, and an unyielding commitment to uncovering the truth no matter the cost. The night of the auction arrived under a blanket of fog that clung to the Venetian lagoon like a shroud. Disguised as a wealthy collector from northern Italy, Ferrara slipped past guards and shadowed patrons whose faces were masked in elegant Venetian carnival style, their identities hidden behind ornate disguises. Inside the crypt, the air was thick with the scent of incense and the muted murmur of illicit transactions. Priceless relics, icons from Byzantine churches, fragments of Renaissance frescoes, and ancient manuscripts were displayed on velvet cloths, their true origins erased by expert forgeries and falsified provenance. As bids were raised in hushed tones, Ferrara's gaze caught a figure moving stealthily among the crowd, a man with a cold, calculating demeanor who seemed to command the room without uttering a word. It was the mysterious broker rumored to be the auction's orchestrator, a ghost who had slipped through the cracks of law enforcement for years. In that moment, the inspector realized that the threads of the conspiracy were tighter and more dangerous than he had imagined. The auction was not just a marketplace, but a battleground for power and survival, where alliances could shift with the flicker of a candle's flame. The climax came swiftly and violently. Just as a rare Venetian reliquary was about to be sold for a staggering sum, an explosion shattered the fragile calm, sending shards of glass and cries of panic echoing through the crypt. Smoke curled upward, obscuring faces and turning the night into chaos. Ferrara fought through the confusion, chasing the shadowy broker into the labyrinth of narrow alleys and bridges that crisscrossed Venice's heart. The city, so often a labyrinth of beauty and history, now became a deadly maze where every corner could hide an enemy. In the end, the chase led to a dilapidated palazzo overlooking the Grand Canal, where Ferrara confronted the broker, a man whose greed and cruelty were masked by charm and sophistication. The confrontation was tense, a battle of wills beneath the moonlit sky, but the inspector's persistence paid off. The broker was unmasked, revealing a tangled web of crime that stretched far beyond Venice, implicating figures across Europe's shadowy underworld. As dawn broke over the ancient city, Ferrara stood on the Rialto Bridge, the weight of justice pressing heavy, but tempered by the fragile hope that Venice's heart could still beat free, at least for now. The aftermath of the chaotic auction and the arrest of the broker sent shockwaves not only through Venice, but throughout the criminal networks that had thrived in the shadows for decades. Yet, for Inspector Marco Ferrara, the victory felt bittersweet, a fragile triumph in a city still haunted by its ghosts. The layers of corruption he peeled back revealed a much deeper rot within the cultural institutions he had sworn to protect. His investigation had uncovered that the stolen artifacts were merely the surface of a more insidious crime, a network that used art as currency for laundering money, bribing officials, and expanding influence across borders. Ferrara's office was flooded with new leads, some pointing towards powerful figures in Rome and Milan, others suggesting complicity among international collectors who preferred anonymity to legality. The complexity of the case weighed heavily on him, the lines between friend and foe blurring as alliances shifted in unexpected ways. Still, his resolve did not waver. If anything, the challenge sharpened his focus, and the city's maze of canals, alleys, and palazzos became the battleground where justice and deception clashed in relentless pursuit. As he delved deeper, Ferrara began to notice patterns in the subtle dance of Venice's elite, whose lives intertwined with the art world's glittering surface yet concealed dangerous secrets beneath. Invitations to exclusive gallery openings, charity fundraisers, and private auctions became opportunities to observe the subtle exchanges of power. The flick of a glance, a whispered name, a briefcase discreetly passed under the table. In this world, appearances were everything, and the inspector learned to navigate the delicate etiquette while keeping his instincts razor-sharp. One name kept recurring in the murmurings of informants: Isabella Moretti, a brilliant and enigmatic art historian whose expertise was sought after by museums and collectors alike. Her involvement seemed paradoxical. Was she a guardian of cultural heritage or a cunning manipulator using her knowledge to facilitate the syndicate's ambitions? Ferrara's encounters with Moretti were fraught with tension and mutual suspicion, a game of intellect and will that blurred the lines between adversary and potential ally. Each conversation peeled back layers of intrigue, revealing a woman as complex and shadowed as the city itself. The turning point came with a late-night call that brought Ferrara rushing to a secluded warehouse near the Venetian Lagoon's industrial docks, where a fresh shipment of illegally obtained artifacts had just arrived. The operation to intercept the cargo was tense and meticulously planned, with the inspector leading a specialized team through the maze of containers and fog-laden piers. As they uncovered crates filled with priceless relics destined for the black market, Ferrara realized this was not just a smuggling ring, but a well-oiled machine capable of striking anywhere at any time. Among the recovered items was an ancient manuscript, its pages brittle but inscribed with secrets that could destabilize powerful figures involved in the illicit trade. The discovery electrified the investigation, opening a new front in the war against a network that thrived on secrecy and silence. Standing amid the crates, the inspector felt the weight of responsibility heavier than ever. The fate of Venice's heritage, and perhaps the soul of the city, hinged on his next moves. The shadows of the past stretched long into the present, and Marco Ferrara knew the fight for justice was far from over. Let's jump to next story. Story 7. The rain fell steadily over Berlin's cold streets in the autumn of 2019, turning the pavement slick and reflecting the neon signs flickering in the night like ghosts trapped in glass. The city, a patchwork of history and modernity, held its breath beneath the weight of secrets that only the shadows dared to whisper. Detective Lena Kruger had learned to navigate this labyrinth of streets and alleys with the practiced ease of someone who understood that crime in Berlin was rarely about petty theft or simple motives. It was about power, raw, ruthless, and tangled in the complex web of politics, corruption, and the underground networks that pulsed beneath the city's surface. Tonight, she stood outside a grimy building in Kreuzberg, the heart of Berlin's alternative scene, where a brutal murder had shattered the fragile peace of a community long accustomed to its own rules. The victim, a local journalist named Marcus Weber, was known for his fearless exposés on organized crime and political scandals. His death was no random act but a calculated message, one designed to silence truth and spread fear. Inside the dimly lit apartment where Weber was found, chaos told the story of a violent struggle. Furniture was overturned, papers scattered as if in desperate defense, and the air was thick with the metallic scent of blood. Lena studied the scene carefully, her eyes tracing the jagged wounds and the broken digital recorder lying near the victim's hand, a device that might hold the key to unveiling the dark network Weber had been chasing. The city's underworld was a tangled mess of competing factions, drug cartels from the east, shadowy political operatives with fingers in every pie, and tech-savvy hackers who traded secrets for power and money. As Lena moved through the crime scene, her mind raced to connect the dots. Weber had been working on a story that threatened to expose a covert alliance between these forces, a nexus of corruption that reached into the highest offices of the city government. To bring justice to Berlin, she knew she would have to delve deeper into this murky world, risking everything to uncover a truth that many wanted buried. The investigation quickly led Lena into Berlin's sprawling network of nightclubs, illegal gambling dens, and backroom meetings where deals were struck in whispers over smoky tables. Every step into this shadow world revealed the stakes. The delicate balance between law enforcement and criminal enterprises was fraying, and those on the wrong side were growing bolder. Lena's inquiries brought her face to face with characters from the city's underbelly. A former East German informant with scars as deep as his secrets, a charismatic nightclub owner who doubled as a money launderer, and a mysterious hacker known only as Phantom, who seemed to have eyes everywhere and allegiances to no one. Trust was a rare commodity, and betrayals came swiftly. In a city still healing from its divided past, the ghosts of espionage and double lives lingered in the corners of every street. Lena felt the pressure mounting, knowing that one wrong move could mean not just the failure of the case, but a deadly end. Yet, beneath the tension, she found herself drawn deeper, compelled by the flicker of justice and the hope that truth, no matter how buried, could still break through the darkest night. The deeper detective Lena Kruger waded into the tangled web of Berlin's criminal underworld. The clearer it became that Marcus Weber's murder was merely the surface ripple of a far larger conspiracy. The threads stretched beyond the city, weaving through corridors of power in Berlin's political elite and shadowy factions operating in the vast no-man's land between legality and lawlessness. Lena's nights blurred into a haze of surveillance footage, encrypted messages, and whispered threats as she pieced together a puzzle that refused to fit neatly into any category. The nightclub scene she infiltrated pulsed with danger and duplicity, each encounter a delicate balance of interrogation and diplomacy. It was in one of these smoke-filled rooms that she met Victor Scholl, a man whose charm masked a ruthless ambition. Once a soldier in a secretive unit during the Cold War, Scholl had reinvented himself as a kingpin in the modern age, orchestrating a vast network of illegal arms deals and cybercrime operations. His reach was far, and his smile was a weapon as lethal as any firearm. Yet, despite his cold, calculating nature, Victor hinted at fractures within the alliance, rumblings of betrayal that might be the key to unraveling the entire operation. As Lena dug into Victor's world, she found herself navigating a labyrinth of double crosses and shifting loyalties. The hacker known as Phantom emerged from the shadows with cryptic clues embedded in digital dead drops, leaving Lena a trail of breadcrumbs in encrypted emails and hidden servers. Each discovery revealed a layer of deceit, so profound it threatened to engulf the entire investigation. The stakes escalated quickly. With every lead, Lena faced increasing resistance not only from the criminals, but from elements within her own department who seemed reluctant to expose the city's darkest secrets. It became clear that Marcus Weber's exposé had cut too close to a truth that powerful people wanted to remain buried. Under pressure from unseen forces, Lena had to rely on her instincts and a small circle of trusted allies. Among them was Tobias Reinhardt, an investigative journalist and old friend who shared her commitment to justice, but warned her of the dangerous line they were crossing. Together, they pieced together a web of illicit contracts, backdoor political favors, and a smuggling ring trafficking in everything from weapons to stolen technology, all financed through a shadowy front company operating under the guise of a legitimate business. The climax of Lena's investigation came unexpectedly during a covert sting operation orchestrated in the underground parking lot beneath the Berlin Hauptbahnhof. It was here, amid the cold concrete and flickering fluorescent lights, that Lena confronted the heart of the conspiracy. A meeting between Victor Scholl, high-ranking government officials, and foreign operatives seeking to broker a deal that could shift the balance of power in Europe's underworld. The tension in the air was palpable, every second charged with the risk of violence and betrayal. Lena's voice cracked through the silence as she stepped into the harsh light, badge flashing, demanding arrests and answers. Chaos erupted as gunfire shattered the fragile alliance. Loyalties shattered and truth exploded into the open. In the aftermath, as suspects were taken into custody and the media exploded with revelations, Lena stood outside the station, the chill of the Berlin air biting through her coat. Justice had been served, but the cost was clear. A city's trust fractured, and the shadows lurking beneath its streets more dangerous than ever. Yet, even as the dust settled, Lena Kruger knew this battle was only the beginning. For in Berlin, where history and modernity collided, the war for truth and justice never truly ended. The aftermath of the raid at Berlin Hauptbahnhof sent ripples through the corridors of power, both in the government and the underworld, leaving Detective Lena Kruger caught in the eye of a storm far bigger than she had ever anticipated. Despite the arrests and the initial exposure of the conspiracy, the true extent of the corruption began to surface in fragments, whispered rumors, and carefully guarded secrets. Powerful figures, shielded by layers of legal protection and political influence, began maneuvering to contain the damage. Lena quickly realized that her fight was no longer just about bringing criminals to justice. It was a battle against an entire system that thrived on silence, fear, and complicity. Her office was inundated with threats, anonymous calls in the dead of night, shadowy figures tailing her movements, and subtle warnings veiled as chance encounters. The city that once felt like a puzzle she could solve now loomed like a fortress guarded by unseen enemies. Still, the determination that had driven her from the beginning burned brighter than ever. She understood that every piece of evidence she uncovered, every name she revealed, chipped away at the foundation of a corrupt empire that had plagued Berlin for decades. The investigation's deeper layers revealed a world where crime and politics were so deeply entwined they were nearly indistinguishable. Lena's pursuit of the truth led her to a clandestine meeting with an insider willing to risk everything, a disillusioned member of the syndicate whose conscience had finally cracked under the weight of guilt. His revelations unveiled the existence of a secret council, a shadow government manipulating not only illicit trade, but also influencing legislation and law enforcement appointments. This council operated from the highest echelons, using financial leverage and blackmail to control politicians, judges, and police officers alike. As Lena absorbed this staggering information, she knew that exposing the council would not only shake Berlin, but could ignite an international scandal with unpredictable consequences. The city's very soul seemed to tremble under the weight of this knowledge. Yet, the inspector's resolve remained unbroken. Armed with this new intelligence, she coordinated with trusted colleagues and external allies, cautiously building a case that could withstand the immense pressure and covert attempts to derail her efforts. The climax of this phase of the investigation unfolded on a bleak winter evening in a discreet government building on the outskirts of the city. Lena and her team, supported by federal prosecutors and cybercrime specialists, executed a coordinated operation targeting the council's members and their financial networks. The tension was suffocating as the officers breached rooms filled with documents, encrypted drives, and luxury items that symbolized the opulence funded by corruption. The operation exposed a sophisticated scheme of bribery, election manipulation, and international money laundering that extended beyond Germany's borders. Media coverage exploded within hours, igniting public outrage and demands for reform. Standing amidst the chaos, Lena felt a complex mixture of relief, exhaustion, and the harsh awareness that this victory was but a single battle in a larger war. Berlin's streets, soaked by rain and history, whispered promises of renewal and the eternal struggle for justice. And as the city slowly awakened to the dawn of a new day, Lena Kruger prepared herself for the battles still to come, knowing that in a city like Berlin, crime and power would always find new shadows to hide within. Let's jump to next story. Story 8. The city of Hamburg in 2010 was a mosaic of contrasts. A bustling port city where the shimmering facades of modern office buildings towered over centuries-old brick warehouses, and the salty tang of the Elbe River mingled with the acrid smell of diesel and smoke. Detective Eric Bauer had grown up navigating these streets, familiar with their secrets and the shadows that lingered beneath their surface. That autumn evening, the damp air was heavy with fog, blurring the sharp edges of the city and cloaking its darkest corners in a suffocating mist. Eric's phone buzzed relentlessly as he sat in his cramped office, the glow of his computer screen illuminating folders of cold cases and fresh leads alike. The latest had landed on his desk just hours earlier, a grisly discovery in the Docks district, a dismembered body found in a shipping container, its identity unknown but the message unmistakable. This was no ordinary homicide. The brutal nature of the crime, coupled with the meticulous way the body was concealed, spoke of a predator well versed in the art of evasion and intimidation. For Eric, this case was personal, a puzzle that tugged at his instincts, a thread he could not ignore despite warnings to tread carefully. The docks were a world unto themselves, a labyrinth of cranes, containers, and narrow alleys where illicit trades were as common as the ships coming and going. Eric's arrival at the scene was met by a team of forensic experts methodically documenting the grisly evidence, while uniformed officers secured the perimeter, wary of prying eyes and potential threats. The container's cold metal walls seemed to absorb the chill of the night, and the dim glow of portable lights cast long shadows that flickered like specters. The body was that of a middle-aged man, his features marred beyond recognition, but marked by tattoos that hinted at ties to the local biker gangs, notorious players in Hamburg's underworld. Eric's mind raced through the possible motives: a warning to rival gangs, retaliation for a betrayal, or something more sinister involving human trafficking or drug smuggling. Each possibility led deeper into a world where alliances were fragile, and loyalty was often bought and sold in blood. The detective's thoughts were interrupted by the arrival of Lena Fisher, a specialist in cybercrime whose expertise had often been the key to cracking cases where traditional methods faltered. Together, they examined the scant digital clues, GPS signals, encrypted phone records, and shadowy internet chatter that suggested the victim was a small part of a much larger operation. As the investigation unfolded, Eric and Lena found themselves pulled into a vortex of deception and violence that extended far beyond Hamburg's docks. The case revealed a sprawling criminal network linking corrupt officials, international drug cartels, and underground arms dealers. The city's veneer of order was stripped away to expose a fragile ecosystem where power was brokered in whispered deals and enforced through brutal retribution. The more they uncovered, the more dangerous their work became. Anonymous threats escalated to direct attacks on their safety, forcing them to operate in the shadows themselves, wary of who to trust. Amidst the escalating tension, a breakthrough came when they traced a shipment linked to the victim's identity to a small warehouse in the industrial district. The raid that followed was a frenetic clash of gunfire and sirens, culminating in the arrest of a key figure whose interrogation promised to unravel the network's hierarchy. Yet, even as they celebrated the victory, Eric sensed that the true puppeteers remained hidden, their influence stretching like roots into the city's core. The struggle to expose them would test every ounce of his resolve, pushing him into a world where justice was a fragile illusion and survival meant outwitting enemies who played by no rules. The warehouse raid marked only the beginning of a far deeper descent into the underbelly of Hamburg's criminal empire. As dawn broke over the city, casting pale light across the muddy docks, Detective Eric Bauer and cyber specialist Lena Fisher sifted through mountains of seized evidence. Encrypted laptops, false passports, ledgers written in code, and dozens of mobile phones burned beyond immediate recovery. The complexity of the operation became immediately apparent. They were not merely dealing with street-level criminals, but a sophisticated syndicate that had mastered the art of invisibility in the digital age. The investigation expanded rapidly, pulling in agents from the Bundeskriminalamt and international partners from Europol, all driven by a shared urgency to dismantle a network suspected of trafficking drugs, arms, and people throughout northern Europe. Each lead uncovered revealed layers of corruption and duplicity. Port officials turning a blind eye to suspicious shipments, local police officers compromised by bribes, and politicians carefully grooming the syndicate to ensure immunity. For Eric, the city he once knew was slipping away beneath his feet, replaced by a grim chessboard where every move could mean the difference between justice and death. Their efforts soon drew attention from unexpected quarters. A mysterious informant, who identified himself only as Klaus, began sending cryptic messages, warnings interlaced with coded intelligence that seemed to confirm the presence of a mole within the police department itself. The sense of betrayal gnawed at Eric, who had always trusted his colleagues implicitly. Now, every conversation was laced with suspicion, every glance over his shoulder a reminder that the enemy could be lurking in plain sight. Despite this paranoia, Klaus's information was invaluable. Through a painstaking process of cross-referencing phone records, shipping manifests, and financial transactions, Eric and Lena began to unravel a trafficking route that spanned from the docks of Hamburg through the industrial heartlands of Poland and into the dark markets of Russia. It was a corridor built on fear and exploitation, run by ruthless men who left destruction in their wake. The human cost was staggering. Victims trafficked across borders, stripped of dignity and freedom, their lives a mere currency in the syndicate's vast ledger of profit and power. For Eric, the emotional toll was immense. Each name, each face uncovered was a haunting reminder of the stakes involved. One cold night, while reviewing surveillance footage from a hidden camera near the docks, Lena noticed a figure appearing repeatedly in the background of various shipments. The man was dressed inconspicuously but carried an unmistakable air of authority. Always calm, always watching. Through digital enhancement and cross-checking with passport databases, they identified him as Stefan Vogel, a mid-level government official who had somehow managed to evade suspicion. This revelation shattered any remaining illusions about the extent of the syndicate's reach. Stefan's role was more than administrative. He was a linchpin in the system, facilitating the movement of illicit goods under the cover of bureaucratic legitimacy. Confronting this truth required careful planning. One misstep could jeopardize the entire investigation. Eric coordinated with federal prosecutors to prepare a sting operation that would expose Stefan's dealings without alerting the entire network. The tension mounted as they waited for the perfect moment, knowing full well that any leak could send the syndicate scattering into the shadows. Every phone call, every coded message, was a potential harbinger of disaster. The operation culminated in a tense sting at an abandoned shipping yard on the outskirts of Hamburg. Undercover officers posing as buyers and facilitators waited in the shadows, cameras rolling as Stefan arrived to oversee a shipment exchange. The air was thick with anticipation, and the silence was punctuated only by the hum of distant cranes and the lapping of water against rusted hulls. When the signal was given, the scene erupted in a controlled chaos. Officers swarmed the area, arresting Stefan and several of his associates, seizing a cache of weapons and narcotics that confirmed the syndicate's vast operation. The media frenzy that followed brought a wave of public outrage and political pressure for reforms, yet Eric knew this victory was fragile. The network had been dealt a blow but not destroyed. Behind bars, the arrested men remained tight-lipped, protected by codes of silence and the looming threat of retribution against their families. The shadowy council that controlled the syndicate's broader operations remained elusive, their identities and motives buried beneath layers of deception. For Eric and Lena, the path ahead was clear but daunting. To follow the breadcrumbs deeper into a maze where trust was a commodity as rare as justice itself, and where every step could be their last. The arrest of Stefan Vogel sent shockwaves through the corridors of Hamburg's political and criminal worlds, exposing cracks in the seemingly impenetrable fortress that the syndicate had built over years. Yet, despite the initial celebrations and media fanfare, Detective Eric Bauer remained painfully aware that the deeper layers of corruption and conspiracy were still intact, hidden behind the polished facades of power and influence. Days after the raid, as Eric sat in his dimly lit office poring over interrogation transcripts and financial records, a chilling realization dawned on him. The syndicate was not just a collection of criminals, but a meticulously orchestrated network intertwined with legitimate businesses, public officials, and even foreign intelligence operatives. This revelation transformed the investigation from a city-level criminal probe into a potential national crisis, demanding discretion, resilience, and above all caution. The stakes had escalated far beyond personal vendettas or simple justice. This was a war against an invisible enemy whose reach extended into the very institutions designed to uphold the law. The fallout from the investigation began to manifest in subtle, yet dangerous ways. Whispers of impending retaliation circulated through the underworld, and Eric found his movements closely monitored by unknown observers. Anonymous threats grew more frequent, leaving notes pinned to his car windshield or slipped under his apartment door, warnings cloaked in menace but unmistakable in their intent. At the same time, internal pressures mounted as political figures, eager to contain the scandal, pushed for the case to be quietly dropped or diverted. Eric faced a new adversary within the system itself. those who prioritized stability and reputation over truth and justice. His relationship with Lena Fisher became a vital lifeline, their shared commitment to exposing the syndicate's heart forging a bond of trust and mutual dependence. Together, they navigated the perilous terrain of shadow diplomacy and clandestine meetings, relying on coded messages and trusted intermediaries to avoid detection. Their investigation revealed that the syndicate's financial lifeblood coursed through a web of offshore accounts and shell companies, many registered in tax havens where accountability was nearly impossible. The complexity of this network required collaboration with international agencies, adding layers of bureaucracy and legal hurdles that slowed their progress but could not extinguish their resolve. A breakthrough came unexpectedly during a late-night stakeout near the Elbe River, where a shipment known to be linked to the syndicate's operations was scheduled to arrive. Eric and Lena observed as a convoy of unmarked trucks unloaded crates under the watchful eyes of armed guards. The crates were quickly transferred to a warehouse, and using infrared scanners and audio surveillance, they discovered evidence of weapons caches and falsified shipping documents indicating a broader, smuggling route extending to the Balkans. The scale of the operation was staggering, and it became clear that dismantling the syndicate required more than raids and arrests. It demanded a coordinated assault on their financial infrastructure and political protection networks. Back at headquarters, Eric convened a covert task force comprising trusted officers and legal experts, devising a multi-pronged strategy to expose the syndicate's leadership. The task force moved with cautious precision, aware that leaks could jeopardize months of painstaking work. As the pieces of the puzzle began to fall into place, Eric felt a renewed sense of purpose tempered by the sobering knowledge that this fight would be long and fraught with peril. The climax of this chapter in their crusade unfolded in a dramatic court case that captivated the nation. Prosecutors presented irrefutable evidence of corruption, trafficking, and bribery, while defense attorneys deployed every legal maneuver to discredit witnesses and suppress key documents. The courtroom became a battleground where truth wrestled with power, and the weight of public scrutiny pressed heavily on all involved. For Eric, the trial was more than a professional milestone. It was a personal reckoning with the forces that had threatened to consume him. Though the verdict delivered justice to many victims and brought some leaders to account, it also underscored the resilience of the syndicate's core. Many high-ranking conspirators escaped conviction, shielded by technicalities and the shadows of influence. In the quiet aftermath, as the city's skyline glimmered beneath a fading sunset, Eric and Lena understood that their mission was far from over. The war against the syndicate was an ongoing battle, one that demanded vigilance, courage, and a relentless pursuit of justice in the face of darkness. Hamburg, with its storied past and restless spirit, had become their battleground, and they were determined to fight until the shadows no longer held sway. Let's jump to next story. Story 9. The chill of an early autumn evening settled over Berlin as Detective Miriam Keller stepped out of her unmarked car and surveyed the scene before her. A nondescript apartment building in Kreuzberg, its faded brick facade casting long shadows under the flickering streetlights. The faint scent of damp concrete and exhaust hung in the air, mixing with the distant echoes of late-night revelers and the hum of city life that never quite slept. Inside, a brutal crime had shattered the uneasy calm of this multicultural neighborhood. A young man, barely 25, was found dead in his apartment, the victim of a violent robbery that had spiraled into something far darker. Miriam, a seasoned investigator with a reputation for tenacity and a sharp intellect, had been called in not just because of the severity of the crime, but because of the strange circumstances surrounding it. The victim, Leon Weber, had connections that stretched beyond the usual petty criminal circles. Rumors whispered of ties to one of Berlin's most elusive and dangerous underground networks, a syndicate known simply as Die Schatten, the Shadows. Their name was spoken in hushed tones by dealers, thieves, and informants alike, a ghostly force that pulled strings in the city's darkest corners, leaving few traces behind but plenty of broken lives. The investigation began with the meticulous gathering of evidence, a cluttered apartment strewn with signs of struggle, shattered glass, and a cryptic message scrawled hastily on a wall in charcoal. Das Licht wird alles entfallen. The light will reveal all. The phrase haunted Miriam as much as the cold case files stacked on her desk. Who had left the message and why? Was it a taunt, a clue, or a desperate cry for help? As she delved deeper, she discovered that Leon had been more than a random victim. He was a courier for the syndicate, entrusted with transporting sensitive information between Berlin and other major cities across Europe. His death was a warning, a calculated strike meant to silence him and send a message to anyone who dared cross Die Schatten. Miriam's instincts told her that beneath the surface of the crime was a much larger game, one involving betrayal, power struggles, and a web of deceit that stretched far beyond the immediate tragedy. The case demanded more than just police work. It required understanding the hidden language of the streets, the unspoken rules of survival in a city where shadows moved faster than the daylight could catch them. Miriam enlisted the help of Jonas Fischer, an expert in cybercrime whose skill with digital forensics had earned him a reputation as one of the best in the Berlin police force. Together, they began piecing together Leon's last movements, tracing encrypted messages and following financial transactions that wove an intricate tapestry of contacts, safe houses, and covert meetings. It quickly became clear that Die Schatten operated with an almost corporate efficiency, using modern technology to mask their operations beneath layers of anonymity. Their influence penetrated the underworld as well as legitimate businesses, making it nearly impossible to distinguish friend from foe. As they uncovered evidence of drug trafficking, arms smuggling, and money laundering, Miriam and Jonas found themselves navigating a treacherous landscape where every alliance was fragile and every decision could provoke deadly consequences. The deeper they dug, the more they realized the extent to which corruption had infiltrated the city's institutions, from the lowest-ranking officers to high-level officials. It was a sobering reminder that the fight for justice was not merely against criminals, but against a system designed to protect them. The investigation soon took a perilous turn when Miriam received an anonymous tip directing her to a secret meeting in a rundown warehouse near the Spree River. Under the cover of darkness, she and Jonas arrived to find a gathering of shadowy figures exchanging envelopes and nodding in cautious approval. The air was thick with tension and the smell of stale cigarettes, as deals were made and threats implied with subtle gestures. From the edges of the crowd, Miriam spotted a familiar face, Rainer Schmidt, a notorious fixer rumored to be the syndicate's eyes and ears within the city's political circles. His presence confirmed what Miriam had feared. The syndicate's grip extended far beyond the streets, twisting through the very fabric of Berlin's power structures. That night marked a turning point in the investigation. Armed with new intelligence and a growing list of suspects, Miriam knew the path ahead would be fraught with danger. The syndicate would not relinquish control easily, and every move to expose them risked triggering a violent backlash. Yet, for Miriam, the stakes were personal. The city she loved, with its rich history and vibrant culture, was being suffocated by a darkness that thrived in silence. She vowed to shine a light into those shadows, no matter the cost. The following days were a whirlwind of surveillance, wiretaps, and late-night stakeouts that tested Miriam's endurance and resolve. The syndicate's layers of secrecy made every breakthrough feel like peeling back an onion only to reveal more layers beneath. Despite the mounting pressure, Miriam and Jonas pushed forward, meticulously analyzing phone records and decrypting messages intercepted from encrypted chat apps favored by the syndicate's operatives. Slowly, patterns emerged: meetings at obscure cafes, coded references to shipments, and financial trails leading to front companies in the heart of the city's financial district. Yet, every piece of evidence they uncovered seemed to be part of a larger, more complex puzzle. The syndicate was not just trafficking drugs and arms. It was entwined with high-stakes political corruption and money laundering schemes that threatened to destabilize local governance. The realization that they were up against an empire that manipulated everything from the streets to the seats of power heightened the risks involved. Miriam's instincts warned her that their investigation was being watched, and soon enough, signs of retaliation became impossible to ignore. One morning, Miriam arrived at her apartment to find her front door slightly ajar, a chilling reminder that the shadows were closing in. Inside, papers were scattered across the floor, and her computer had been tampered with, a clear message from the syndicate: back off or face consequences. Yet, rather than intimidate her, the intrusion fueled Miriam's determination. She knew she was getting close, and with Jonas by her side, they fortified their resolve. The duo doubled down on their efforts, coordinating with trusted federal agents and cybercrime units to trace financial flows linked to the syndicate's operations. Their investigation uncovered a network of shell companies funneling millions of euros through accounts registered in Luxembourg and Cyprus, disguising the origins of illicit funds. As they dug deeper, they found links to a prominent politician, a rising star whose public image was a stark contrast to the dark dealings they uncovered behind closed doors. This connection posed a new dilemma. Exposing the syndicate meant exposing those who protected it, and the political fallout could be catastrophic. Amid the tension, Miriam's personal life began to unravel. Long hours and relentless stress strained her relationships, isolating her from friends and family who feared for her safety. The weight of the case bore down heavily, forcing her to confront her own vulnerabilities and doubts. She found brief solace in quiet moments, walking along the Spree River at dawn, the city slowly waking beneath a pastel sky, or sitting in a small cafe savoring bitter espresso while reviewing case files. Yet the city's beauty stood in stark contrast to the darkness she fought daily. During one crucial operation, Miriam and Jonas orchestrated a sting to intercept a key shipment of weapons destined for the syndicate's Balkan contacts. The operation was fraught with risk. Any mistake could cost lives and compromise the investigation. Under cover of night, their team tracked a convoy to an abandoned factory on the city's outskirts. As armed officers moved in, gunfire erupted, shattering the silence and throwing the night into chaos. Miriam's heart pounded as she witnessed the confrontation unfold. The syndicate's enforcers were ruthless, fighting to protect their empire. The raid resulted in multiple arrests and crucial evidence was seized, but it also marked a dangerous escalation in the conflict. The aftermath of the raid brought temporary relief, but also a new wave of threats and intimidation. Miriam's name appeared in the tabloids, labeled as both hero and target. Anonymous phone calls, shadowy figures trailing her steps, and cryptic messages warned her to stop digging. Yet, even as fear crept in, Miriam's resolve hardened. The people behind Die Shatten had underestimated her, believing they could outmaneuver a single detective with threats and violence. Instead, she became a symbol of resistance, rallying colleagues and informants who sought to dismantle the syndicate's grip on the city. Among the new leads was a mysterious informant known only as Cater, a former syndicate insider whose knowledge was invaluable, but whose loyalty remained uncertain. Miriam arranged a clandestine meeting in a quiet park, their conversation a delicate dance of trust and caution. Cater revealed insights into the syndicate's leadership structure, naming key figures who orchestrated operations from behind layers of anonymity. This intelligence was a turning point, providing the task force with targets for the next phase of the investigation. As autumn deepened and the days grew shorter, Miriam felt the weight of the city's darkness pressing down, but also sensed a flicker of hope. The struggle against Die Shatten was far from over, but with each arrest, each piece of evidence uncovered, the syndicate's power waned. The journey was perilous, filled with setbacks and sacrifices, yet Miriam's conviction never faltered. She had seen the toll the syndicate took on victims and families, the way fear corroded communities, and she vowed to see justice served. Berlin was a city of contradictions, its vibrant culture and painful history intertwined in a constant battle between light and shadow. For Miriam Keller, the fight to reclaim the city from its criminal underworld was not just a duty, but a personal crusade, one that would test the limits of courage, loyalty, and justice in the face of overwhelming darkness. The final chapter of the investigation unfolded like a high-stakes chess game, where every move was calculated and the consequences of failure were deadly. Armed with Cater's revelations, Miriam and her team planned a coordinated series of raids targeting the syndicate's upper echelons. The network, once thought impenetrable, began to unravel as key operatives were arrested and assets frozen. Yet, with every arrest, the risk escalated. The syndicate's desperation manifested in brutal acts of retaliation, firebombings, kidnappings, and anonymous threats that sought to silence the hunt. The city's underbelly roiled with tension, and even those who once dared not speak now whispered of the relentless detective who refused to back down. Miriam's personal safety became a growing concern. She received round-the-clock protection, but continued to work tirelessly, refusing to let fear dictate her actions. Every night, as she reviewed files and prepared for the next operation, she grappled with the enormity of what they faced. The syndicate was not just a criminal enterprise, but a malignant force embedded deep within Berlin's social and political fabric. The culmination came on a cold November night. Intelligence pointed to a clandestine meeting of Die Shatten's leadership in an opulent villa nestled in the outskirts of Potsdam, cloaked by dense woods and guarded by loyal enforcers. The task force moved quietly under the cover of darkness, their approach masked by the sound of distant traffic and rustling leaves. Miriam's heart raced with a mixture of fear and determination as the team surrounded the estate, ready to strike. Inside, the leaders discussed their dwindling options, unaware that the walls had ears and their empire was crumbling. The raid was swift and decisive. Gunfire erupted, echoing through the night, shattering the quiet and sending shockwaves through the syndicate's ranks. Miriam led the charge, navigating the maze-like corridors with a clarity born of years of experience. One by one, the kingpins were captured, men who had long evaded justice, their faces etched with shock and disbelief as they realized their reign was over. The operation was a success, but it came at a cost. Several officers were wounded, and the psychological toll on Miriam was profound. She had stared into the abyss and emerged battered but unbroken. In the days that followed, the city seemed to breathe a cautious sigh of relief. News of the syndicate's dismantling spread, sparking hope among communities long oppressed by crime and corruption. Trials began, exposing the depths of the criminal enterprise and the complicity of those who had shielded it. Miriam's role was both lauded and scrutinized, a reminder that justice was a complex, often imperfect pursuit. Despite the victories, Miriam knew the shadows would never fully disappear. Crime adapted, evolving to fill voids left by its fallen leaders. Yet, she found solace in the progress made, the lives saved, the families comforted, and the message sent that no darkness was impenetrable. The city had been tested, and through determination and courage, light had pierced the shadows. For Miriam Keller, the case was more than a job. It was a testament to the power of persistence, the strength of community, and the unyielding pursuit of truth in a world where evil often hid behind the guise of normalcy. As winter cloaked Berlin in frost, Miriam returned to her quiet moments by the Spree, watching the icy river flow beneath the bridges. The city sparkled with holiday lights, a stark contrast to the grim realities she had faced. She allowed herself a moment of reflection, thinking of Leon Weber and all those whose lives had been touched by the syndicate's cruelty. Their memories fueled her resolve, reminding her why the fight mattered. Though the road ahead was uncertain, Miriam was ready to face whatever challenges came next. The shadows might never vanish completely, but as long as there were those willing to stand against them, hope remained alive. And in that hope, Berlin found its redemption. Let's jump to next story. Story 10. The cold winter air hung heavy over Berlin as Detective Lucas Brandt stood on the cracked pavement outside the old warehouse on Kopenicker Strasse, the scene of the latest violent clash that had shaken the city's fragile peace. It was January 2020, and the city was already on edge. The scars of political unrest, surging crime rates, and the undercurrents of an increasingly fractured society were impossible to ignore. Lucas, a seasoned detective with years behind him in the homicide division, was no stranger to the dark alleys of Berlin's criminal underworld, but this case felt different. The bloodshed in the warehouse wasn't just a turf war or a typical gang dispute. It was a message, a chilling declaration of power from a new breed of criminals who thrived in the shadows of the digital age. The bodies found inside were linked to a violent and elusive human trafficking ring that had tightened its grip on the city over the past 2 years, exploiting the vulnerable with ruthless efficiency. Lucas knew this was just the beginning of a labyrinthine investigation that would lead him deep into Berlin's darkest corners, where alliances were fragile and trust was a currency in short supply. The investigation began with little more than scattered clues, an abandoned phone, a torn photograph, and cryptic messages exchanged over encrypted chat platforms. But Lucas had an instinct for reading between the lines, a skill honed by years of peeling back layers of deception. He assembled a small, trusted team that included Annika Weber, a cybercrime analyst with an uncanny ability to decode digital footprints, and Malik Hoffman, a streetwise informant who had his ear to the ground in Berlin's immigrant neighborhoods. Their initial inquiries revealed a disturbing network, a syndicate operating with precision, moving people across borders and laundering money through shell companies scattered throughout Europe. What made the case especially dangerous was the syndicate's infiltration into legitimate sectors. Politicians, businessmen, and even law enforcement officials were suspected to be complicit, making the hunt a perilous balancing act between justice and survival. Lucas's days blurred into nights as he dived headfirst into the case, tracing transactions, interviewing frightened survivors, and piecing together the chilling stories they brought with them. The trafficked victims were often young women and children, snatched from impoverished regions and transported into the heart of Berlin's criminal enterprise. Their voices were fragile, but filled with a desperate hope that the nightmare would end. Each interview weighed heavily on Lucas, pulling him closer to the emotional abyss that many in his profession fought to avoid. The pressure was immense. Media scrutiny intensified as public outrage grew, demanding swift action. Yet, the more the team uncovered, the more it became clear that the syndicate was a hydra. Cut off one head, and two more would take its place. The investigation exposed systemic failures and corruption that stretched across borders and institutions, making every step forward a battle against an invisible and relentless enemy. In a city where history lingered like a shadow, Lucas felt the weight of responsibility, not only as a law enforcer, but as a guardian of Berlin's fragile soul. The city's walls had witnessed countless stories of pain and resilience, and now it was his turn to add a chapter, one that would expose the rot beneath the surface and fight for those who could no longer fight for themselves. The case drew him into the murky world of underground clubs, backroom deals, and coded messages whispered in hushed tones in dimly lit cafes. The digital realm added a new complexity, with the syndicate's use of cryptocurrency and dark web marketplaces shielding their activities from prying eyes. Annika's expertise became invaluable. She unraveled networks of transactions and tracked suspicious activities that would have otherwise gone unnoticed. Together, they began to map the syndicate's hierarchy, from the street-level recruiters to the elusive kingpins who pulled strings from luxurious penthouses far removed from the city's grim realities. Yet, the deeper Lucas went, the more the line between ally and adversary blurred. Malik's contacts brought warnings of betrayal and traps set by those who would protect their interests at all costs. The stakes grew higher when a trusted informant disappeared under mysterious circumstances, sending ripples of fear through the investigation team. Lucas knew that the path to justice was littered with peril, but retreat was not an option. Each breakthrough brought him closer to the syndicate's core, but also closer to danger. The case became a relentless pursuit, one that consumed his thoughts, fractured his personal life, and challenged his very beliefs about morality and justice. The city itself seemed to pulse with the tension of unseen battles, where every shadow could hide a threat, and every ally might be a foe in disguise. As February's cold winds swept through the city, Lucas prepared for what he sensed would be a pivotal moment in the investigation, a chance to strike a decisive blow against the syndicate and expose the rotten underbelly of Berlin's criminal landscape. The question that haunted him was not if they would succeed, but at what cost. In a world where power was built on fear and silence, breaking the code required more than courage. It demanded sacrifice, cunning, and a relentless refusal to let the darkness prevail. The breakthrough came unexpectedly, as these moments often do, when exhaustion weighed heaviest and the city's relentless gray skies seemed to press down on everyone's spirits. Annika had been monitoring a suspicious spike in cryptocurrency transactions tied to a recently established online marketplace that specialized in untraceable goods. The digital trail was thin, but persistent, weaving through layers of encryption that masked the identities of those behind it. After days of relentless hacking and data reconstruction, she uncovered a crucial connection. The marketplace was serving as a front for the syndicate's human trafficking operations, funneling illicit profits and coordinating shipments of victims disguised as commodity exchanges. It was a chilling reminder of how technology had become a weapon in the hands of criminals, enabling them to operate in plain sight while evading law enforcement scrutiny. With this new lead, Lucas saw an opportunity, a fragile window to dismantle part of the network before it could disappear again into the vast digital abyss. Mobilizing quickly, Lucas and his team coordinated with cyber units and international law enforcement agencies. The scope of the operation grew exponentially as they uncovered links extending beyond Germany's borders into Eastern Europe and the Balkans, where many victims were initially trafficked. The investigation was no longer just a local matter. It had become a multinational effort against an entrenched and ruthless network. Lucas found himself navigating a complex web of political alliances, bureaucratic red tape, and conflicting jurisdictions, each threatening to slow the momentum of their mission. In a world increasingly interconnected, the challenges of jurisdictional limits and cross-border cooperation loomed large, often frustrating even the most seasoned detectives. Yet, the urgency was undeniable. Each day delayed meant more lives in peril, more families torn apart by the insidious reach of the syndicate. Meanwhile, the human stories behind the statistics haunted Lucas's every waking moment. He met survivors whose courage defied their shattered circumstances, young women who had been forced into unspeakable horrors, but still carried a flicker of hope for freedom and justice. Their testimonies were raw and harrowing, laying bare the depths of human cruelty and resilience. One survivor, a young Romanian woman named Elena, had managed to escape during a transfer between safe houses and had become a vital source of information. Her recollections detailed the syndicate's methods: false promises of work and security, brutal punishments for disobedience, and a relentless cycle of fear designed to break spirits and maintain control. Elena's courage gave Lucas a renewed sense of purpose, but it also underscored the fragility of the operation. The slightest misstep could endanger her life and jeopardize the entire case. As the days grew colder and the shadows lengthened over Berlin, tensions within the team mounted. Malik, ever the pragmatist, warned Lucas that the syndicate's reach was deeper than anticipated, with sympathizers embedded in key positions. Rumors of leaks within their own ranks bred mistrust, forcing Lucas to tread carefully in choosing who to confide in. The pressure was relentless. Media scrutiny intensified as public demand for justice grew louder, while the syndicate retaliated through intimidation and violence. An explosive device detonated near a police precinct, sending shockwaves through the city and signaling that the criminals were not just fighting to survive, they were fighting to win. In the face of escalating danger, Lucas's resolve hardened. He knew that this was no longer just a case. It was a battle for the soul of the city, a fight against a darkness that threatened to engulf everything he had sworn to protect. The operation culminated in a daring sting planned over weeks, relying on Elena's cooperation and a delicate balance of timing and precision. Lucas, Annika, and Malik coordinated with special forces to intercept a major trafficking shipment at Berlin's central train station, a hub of activity and anonymity that criminals had long exploited. The night was thick with tension and anticipation as plainclothes officers blended into the crowds, surveillance teams monitored every movement, and technical experts tracked communications in real time. The syndicate's operatives moved with practiced efficiency, unaware that their plans were unraveling. When the moment came, it exploded into chaos. Gunfire echoed through the platforms, shouts pierced the cold air, and desperate attempts to flee were met with relentless pursuit. The scene was harrowing, a violent clash between justice and criminal desperation that left no room for error. In the aftermath, dozens of victims were rescued and key figures apprehended. The operation was hailed as a landmark victory, a testament to the power of collaboration and the unyielding commitment of those who fought in the shadows. Yet, for Lucas, the victory was bittersweet. The scars of what he had witnessed, faces haunted by trauma, lives forever altered, reminded him that justice was a journey, not a destination. The syndicate's roots were deep, and the fight was far from over. But in that moment, amidst the ruins of the raid, Lucas felt a flicker of hope. They had struck a blow against the darkness, disrupted a cycle of suffering, and brought light to those who had lived in shadows. It was a reminder that even in the darkest times, courage and resilience could carve a path toward redemption. In the weeks following the raid, Berlin breathed a tentative sigh of relief, but Lucas knew that beneath the surface, the syndicate's remnants were regrouping, plotting retaliation. The city's underworld was never silent for long, and the victory, however significant, had merely shifted the battleground. Lucas returned to his office, the walls cluttered with maps, photographs, and digital printouts, fragments of a puzzle still incomplete. The investigation had revealed not only the brutality of the traffickers, but also the complicity and complacency that allowed such horrors to thrive. Corruption ran through the veins of institutions meant to protect, and confronting that reality was as daunting as facing the criminals themselves. Lucas grappled with the bitter truth that justice was often compromised by political expediency and fear. Yet, he refused to be disillusioned. For every corrupt official exposed, there were others who fought quietly, risking everything to uphold the law. Elena, now placed in a witness protection program, continued to assist the investigation, her bravery becoming a symbol of hope for many survivors. Lucas visited her once, in a small, undisclosed town far from Berlin. She was fragile but determined, her eyes reflecting the pain of the past and the promise of a future reclaimed. Their conversation was brief but profound. Elena spoke of healing, of reclaiming her life piece by piece, and of the responsibility to ensure others did not suffer as she had. Lucas felt a surge of gratitude and a renewed commitment to the fight. He realized that beyond the crime scenes and courtrooms, the true victory lay in giving survivors a voice and a chance to rebuild. The syndicate's digital footprint, though heavily obscured, provided avenues for further infiltration. Annika spearheaded efforts to dismantle the online marketplaces and financial networks sustaining the criminal enterprise. Each success was a blow to their power, but also a reminder of the evolving nature of crime in the 21st century. Technology was both a tool for justice and a weapon for criminals, and keeping pace was a constant challenge. Lucas and his team engaged with international cybercrime units, sharing intelligence and developing strategies to anticipate the syndicate's next moves. It was a game of shadows, where each advance invited a countermove, and the line between hunter and hunted blurred with every passing day. As the months wore on, Lucas found himself reflecting on the broader implications of the case. Berlin, with its vibrant culture and turbulent history, was a microcosm of a world grappling with change, migration, globalization, and inequality creating fertile ground for exploitation. The human trafficking syndicate was not an isolated evil, but a symptom of systemic failures that demanded comprehensive solutions beyond law enforcement. Lucas began advocating for increased support services for survivors, community outreach programs to prevent exploitation, and greater transparency within government institutions. The fight against crime, he realized, required more than arrests and prosecutions. It required a societal reckoning, a commitment to addressing root causes and empowering the vulnerable. Despite the toll the investigation had taken, Lucas found solace in the resilience of those he had come to know, the survivors, his team, and even the city itself. Berlin's streets were scarred but alive, its people determined to reclaim their city from the shadows. Lucas often walked along the Spree River at night, the city lights reflecting on the water's surface, a reminder that even in darkness, light could persist. He carried the memories of the case with him, not as a burden but as a call to action, a testament to the enduring struggle between justice and corruption, hope and despair. The fight was far from over, but Lucas Brandt was ready to continue it, knowing that every small victory was a step toward a safer, more just world.